Assalamu alaikum. Today I have brought another vlog for you in my series of vlogs on literary theory or critical approaches to literary criticism, simplified. So let's discuss structuralism today. So what is structuralism? Structuralism is a way of understanding culture and meaning in the arts by relating the individual piece of art, like a novel, a painting, a symphony, to something larger. In structuralist theory, the relationship between cultural phenomena is a web, network, or structure which exists underneath the way we think and act and produce art. Structuralism and post-structuralism originated in France in the 1950s, and the impact of which created crisis in English studies in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Language and philosophy are the major concerns of these two approaches rather than history or author's intent. Structuralism and formalism were both influenced by the theory of language proposed by the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, and have many overlapping themes and concerns. Saussure's theory of semiotics describes language as a system of signs that accrue meaning arbitrarily through social convention. Structuralism, which emerged as a trend in the 1950s, challenged new criticism and rejected Sartre's existentialism and its notion of radical human freedom. It focused instead how human behavior is determined by cultural, social, and psychological structures. The main theories of structuralism, Ronald Barthes and Jacques Derrida, explored the possibilities of applying structuralist principles to literature. Jacques Lacan, on the other hand, studied psychology in the light of structuralism, blending Freud and Saussure. Michel Foucault's The Order of Things examined the history of science to study the structures of epistemology, though he later denied affiliation with the structuralist movement. Louis Althusser combined Marxism and structuralism to create his own brand of social analysis. So what are the assumptions of structuralism? Saussure's idea of the linguist sign is a seminal concept in all structuralist and post-structuralist discourses. According to him, language is not a naming process by which things get associated with the word or a name. The linguistic sign is made of the union of signifier, a sound image, or a psychological imprint of sound, and signified, the concept. In this view, words are unmotivated signs, as there is no inherent connection between a name signifier and what it designates. It is that signified. Saussure's theory of language emphasizes that meanings are arbitrary and relational. The paradigmatic chain, hovel, shed, hut, house, mansion, palace, where the meaning of each is dependent upon its position in the chain. Semiology understands that a word's meaning derives entirely from its difference from other words in the sign system of language. For example, rain, not brain, or sprain, or rail, or roam, or rain. All signs are cultural constructs that have taken on their meaning through repeated and collective use. Structuralism, in a broader sense, is a way of perceiving the world in terms of structures. The essence of structuralism is the belief that things cannot be understood in isolation. They have to be seen in the context of larger structures they are part of. The context of the larger structures do not exist by themselves, but are formed by our way of perceiving the world. So what is the method if we try to apply these assumptions to a literary text? So how would we approach a literary text? In structuralist criticism, consequently, there is a constant movement away from the interpretation of the individual literary work towards understanding the larger structures which contain them. For example, the structuralist analysis of Donne's poem Good Morrow demands more focus on the relevant genre, the concept of courtly love, etc., rather than on the close reading of the formal elements of the text which are required in new criticism. Concrete details from the story are seen in the context of a larger structure, and the larger structure is then seen as an overall network of basic pairs which have obvious symbolic, thematic, and archetypal resonance. This is the typical structuralist process of moving from the particular to the general, placing the individual work within a wider structural movement. The fundamental belief of structuralism that all human activities are constructed and not natural or essential pervades all seminal works of structuralism. Structuralism tries to reduce the complexity of human experiences to certain underlying structures which are universal, an idea which has its roots in the classicists like Aristotle, who identified simple structures as forming the basis of life. A structure can be defined as any conceptual system that has three properties: wholeness, the system should function as a whole; transformation, system should not be static; and self-regulation, the basic structure should not be changed. Structuralist critics analyze literature on the explicit model of structuralist linguistics. In their analysis, they use the linguistic theory of Saussure as well as the semiotic theory developed by Saussure and the American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce. Structuralist critics emphasize grammatical elements such as verb tenses and the relationships and configurations of figures of speech within the story. This demonstrates the structuralist shift from authorial intention to broader impersonal linguistic structures in which the author's text, a term preferred over work, participates. Saussurean theory, but there are the limitations of structuralism as well. Saussurean theory establishes that human being or reality is not central. It is language that constitutes the word. Saussure employed a number of binary oppositions in his lectures, an important one being speech, and writing. Saussure gives primacy to speech as it guarantees subjectivity and presence, whereas writing, he asserted, denotes absence of the speaker as well as the signified. Jacques Derrida critiqued this as phonocentrism that unduly privileges presence over absence, which led him to question the validity of all the centers, and of course then to the theory of deconstruction. Structuralism has often been criticized for being ahistorical and for favoring deterministic structural forces over the ability of people to act. As the political turbulence of the 1960s and 1970s, especially the student uprising of May 1968, began affecting the academy, issues of power and political struggle moved to the center of people's attention. In the 1980s, deconstruction and its emphasis on the fundamental ambiguity of language rather than its crystalline logical structure became popular, which proved fatal to structuralism. So here are the references, and I would specially ask you to go to the third source, which you would find definitely very useful for the details. Thank you. Hope that you have enjoyed this presentation, and I would be looking forward to your feedback and comments. God bless you all.